I'm gonna bump up my resolution just so I can see it better. Yep. There it is in all its beauty. And it just kind of stops. Alright, now let's tweak with the settings. First, we want this to be more like, lines. We just have dots right now. To fix that, just boost up the emit. What is this called? Oh, nope. You don't want to boost up this. You want to boost up the particles per second. What am I talking about? Just do not listen to me. Also, let's play with the life a bit. Just because they die really fast, you can see that they're dying really fast. I want to make them last a substantial amount of time. Now, this is kind of looking like a circle, and it's kind of small to me. But, what you could do is you could just blow up the layer. But it kind of creates this fuzziness, and, it's just not great. A different way, a better way to make this ball spore thing bigger is just go back to the emitter, and where I said don't mess with the velocity? Well, now you can. The more I mess with the velocity, you can see it can get smaller because the velocity says it's being pushed out, how fast the particles are shooting out of the emitter, which you can think of as a cannon. We'll just set it to about 170 is good. And then let's go back to the aux system, and I'm just going to mess with the colors just a bit because I want to change the feel of this. Maybe switch the colors around. Gets you, yeah, look at that. See, that gives me a very interesting value. Very interesting color. I kind of like that. The green and then it getting dark on the edges. Though, we still have a problem. We have all these white particles. And the best thing to do is just shut them off. And the best way to do that is just going to particle. And the size? Take this number, set it to 0. 0 means we can't see them. So look, now we have this awesome spore-like substance. Alright, now it's not done yet. We need to make it look a little more random, a little more spore-like, fuzzy-like. So go to physics. Now there's a lot of things to physics, but just click the air. Now scroll all the way down to Turbulence Field. Now turbulence is like if the atmosphere was shaking or moving or there was some sort of wind in there that's shifting back and forth. And what that is effect position. I'm just going to drag this up, and as you can see, it gives this entire thing this kind of organic look. Now, the more you do it, you can get some crazy stuff like this. But for right now, we're just going to set it to maybe 100. Okay, maybe 125. Alright, I like 125. That's looking good. So we have all these little spore things. It's kind of growing. See, at the beginning it grows. Now, just this is a really cool effect. If you were to drag this keyframe out, which is the physics time factor, it could look like this entire thing was just slowly growing over time, which is pretty awesome. But that's not really what we're doing. But I'm just pointing this out so you could see all the different things you could do with just this one simple effect. Now, after this is really cool, but let's make it more 3D-like. What's really cool about particular is it has this little 3D box here. It's actually a 3D element. What I mean by this is, well, I'll show you. Go to New, Camera. Now for the camera, I'm just going to set it to 35 millimeters. I think it was actually 36 millimeters, but I think it's fine. We're going to name the camera Cami. Why? Because it's a cool name. Now, now we have that a camera here. We could tell that it kind of changed. Now, go up here. This is your camera options. If you hold it, all these different camera tools come up. We're just going to use the orbit camera tool. Now, if I orbit around this, you can actually see it's a real 3D element. And that's just awesome. So, I'm just going to take it back to where it was by pressing Control-Z. Went too far. Control-Shift-Z to undo and undo. Pretty much you're going forward in time. So we're here. What I want to do is every single one of these layers, if you don't already know, have shortcuts to access certain things. If I were to click this tab, all the options for everything you can come up. But after a while, this can get pretty hectic, especially if you're dealing with different things. So, I just want to bring up some things about this camera. So let's go back to our composition over here. I just want to click this camera and press AA. That brings up the camera options. Now we're going to turn depth of field on. What's cool about this is particulars. It actually uses After Effects depth of field, natively. So this is really awesome. So you're like, oh, what's this gonna do? Well, you see how we have focus distance, aperture, and blur level. That's what we're gonna focus on. This one's okay, and I'm not gonna mess with this. But the focus distance and the aperture is pretty cool. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bump the aperture up. Now, if I bump it up a lot, you can actually see that it's blurring some things out. And that's because it's doing what a real camera would do in real life. It's saying, alright, I'm only going to focus on this part, which is really cool. Like, you can make this aperture really extreme, and some interesting things happen. I'm going to, right now, set it to maybe 600. And then I'm going to play around with the focus distance. Now, this is telling the camera what it's focusing on. Like, things get blurry there. If the focus distance is too far away, you don't see anything. So I'm just going to play around with it, and you can play around with this however you want, just to get the kind of effect you want. But I'm looking for kind of I want the edges to be very, blurry, but some of the inner strands not to be. So almost something like that, but I think I'm just gonna take this blur level and make it more intense. Yeah, if we set this to 300, it's just making the blur level a little more intense. Maybe that's too intense. Maybe 200. And right there, that looks pretty good. Again, you can play around with it to make it look perfect if you want to. I really don't have the time, it being a tutorial, so just play around with it, get something you like. I like this right there. That looks cool. Just a quick tip. Let's say you did this to your spore and you're like, this is awesome, but I don't like all this fuzziness in the background. It looks too cluttered. Well, if it looks too cluttered, it's pretty simple. Bring up U again. Now go back to where it said 50. The particles are 50. So this keyframe. Go to that. Go to your emitter, and just turn the particles down. Let's say 20. And that makes it so you have so much less particles being born. So you get kind of that awesome feel. Press AA again. I just think that this spore could be a little more detailed. Alright. Maybe a little less detailed. Alright, something like that. Sweet. Alright, now let's unsolo the spore layer. It's been soloed for a long time. Now let's unsolo it. And look at that. We're getting somewhere. We are actually getting somewhere. If you move the spore around, I'm just moving the layer around. You can center it kind of inside this jar. I'm also going to click the rotate tool to rotate it, kind of making the spore fit the edges. Now, I'm also going to change the transfer mode of this entire layer. Now, if it's not up, you should be in mode. You should have a mode and all these things set up. I have these things both set up at the same time, but it's called toggling the switches. So just toggle the switches until you can find mode. Now click on mode, and you have all these different settings. I'm just gonna go to add, and that kind of gives it this bright kind of glow feeling. See, we're getting there. From the original, we're definitely getting there. So if you click play, oh, look at that. That's odd. The spore is not following my jar at all. It's not even trying. That's because we haven't tracked anything yet. We haven't said that it should follow. So how do we make the spore follow this clip? Well, that's simple. We're going to use a simple thing called a null tracker, or, tracking data onto a null. Now go to new, null object. Now, a null object, this thing right here, I'm going to solo it so you can see it better. This isn't really anything. It doesn't really actually exist. When you render it, if you click this, which is the render button, it doesn't actually show up. And that's because a null object is just for holding information. Some people could be like, well, why is this important? It's so important for tracking. For instance, let's click our footage here and go to Tracker. If it's not already here, go up to